Today is the sentencing of the defendant for the purposeful and intentional murders of Davion Flanagan and Dominic Rousseau. And in a way, it's the second time their families are gathered again to grieve. It's also a day when Mackenzie's family will grieve for the future of their daughter. All three of these families and the friends of these families are suffering, and all of their lives have been irrevocably changed because of the actions of the defendant. The unintended and collateral consequences of a selfish, intentional, and cruel decision by Mackenzie will ripple forever in time. It's literally changed history because it's ended two lives. Two young men are dead. Their deaths were horrible, terrifying, and tragic. I will say again, if any reasonable person reviews Exhibit 802, there can be no doubt in your mind what happened this night.
Yeah, so real quick, Mackenzie claims she has no recollection of what happened, right? Well, of course she's going to say that, right? Because if she says anything else, then she's admitting, she's guilty. So she's not going to do that, right? Because she doesn't want to go to jail for the rest of her life. But I think she knows exactly what happened. I think that there was some kind of argument in that car, and I think she snapped for whatever reason, and then drove her car at 100 miles an hour straight into the brick wall. And I think she did so in a way that would, protect her as much as possible and hurt her boyfriend and his friend as much as possible, which is exactly what happened.
There can be no doubt of the absolute terror of the two people in that car. The defendant controlled all the events. She chose the day. Specifically, she chose a day just before her 18th birthday. She chose to drive the car, the time to drive the car. She chose an obscure, previously scouted route through an industrial parkway. She chose the target to hit and the victims. She chose the means and the method to follow through. And she planned and purposefully executed the events of July 31st, 2022.
Oh, I'm sorry. So this was premeditated. So she had already planned this route out. She already knew where she was going to hit. Wow.
The review of the evidence supports the factual findings, the forensic testimony, the testimony of the first responders, the testimony of the emergency room doctors who treated the defendant, the testimony of the coroner's medical examiner, the testimony of those who knew the victims and the defendant, and the testimony of the BMV official who provided evidence that not only did the defendant deny any medical condition when applying for her license, which her mother co-signed and attested to, but also that just after the accident, Mackenzie renewed her driver's license and again denied any medical condition. In fact, the defendant was so concerned about driving that, as the state mentioned during the investigation, she asked if they could just suspend her license for 10 years. It is hard to fathom how a person could be concerned about their driving privileges, having just been responsible for the deaths of two people.
Yeah, so she kills two people. Obviously, she should never be allowed to drive again and should be in jail for the rest of her life, as far as I'm concerned. But then she just asked the judge to just suspend her driving license for 10 years. What? Something's wrong with this girl.
There was no medical condition that caused this as an accident. There was no mechanical failure of the car. The record is clear on the facts and the evidence. Her mother's uncorroborated statements without any medical testimony or records is not persuasive. It is also important to remember that even if Mackenzie intended to also die in this crash, that is irrelevant. A failed suicide attempt is not a defense to murder. And even in a murder-suicide attempt, when the perpetrator executing the plan survives, the other death or deaths are still murder. There's only one person who's responsible for the pain of everyone in this room, and that person is you, Mackenzie. Nobody else is responsible. This isn't the fault of Dominic's family, or Davion's family, or your family. And I know that each of you have asked your questions to yourselves, what if? What if I had done this or that? The truth of it is, none of us can control the intentions of another. And when there is a purposeful intent to harm or kill someone, it is the perpetrator alone who bears the responsibility for the choice and the consequences and the harm that follows. The difficulty for sentencing today, honestly, is whether or not I believe you should give consecutive sentences.
What do you guys think? Before she reads it, what do you guys think? Consecutive sentences or not?
I'm troubled
I think she should get the full.
that should I give you a concurrent sentence, that people will believe that somehow I'm being disrespectful to one of the victims. And on the other hand, I have to weigh the punishment. There's a very good likelihood, Mackenzie, that you will spend the rest of your life in prison. That won't be up to me. That will be up to the parole board, and that will be up to you to a great extent. I understand that the pain in this room wants me to impose the harshest sentence, but I don't believe that would be the appropriate sentence, because I do believe that Mackenzie will not be out in 15 years. So she's sentenced on count 2, the murder of Davion Flanagan, 15 years to life. She's sentenced on count 1, the murder of Dominic Russo, 15 years to life, to be served concurrent to each other with credit for time served. I'll waive fines, fees, and costs, and your appellate counsel will be assigned.
All right, so she got sentenced concurrently, which means she only has to serve 15 years to life, which technically she can probably get out in like 7 years if she's good in prison or something like that. But if she would have got consecutive, then she would have been spending 30 years at least, right? So, I don't know. Since this was premeditated, since it was probably a suicide attempt, and she killed both her boyfriend and his friend, I don't see why she wouldn't spend the rest of her life in jail, right? Or at least get the maximum sentence, which would have been 30 years to life, right? I kind of disagree with the judge, but it is what it is, right? Let me know what you guys think. And until next time, True Crime King, out.